On his knees in the driveway, he hunched over, his shoulders heavy with foreboding, as he peered at the trail of destruction beneath his car. The late afternoon sun cast long and unforgiving shadows over the scraped concrete pavers, accentuating each scrape and gouge. As he leaned down for a closer look, an ominous sound pierced the air, the kind that made a man's blood run cold and his stomach lurch. There, jammed between steel and concrete, lay the source of his burgeoning terror. Simon Marks, 37 and anxious to become a homeowner, hardly noticed how odd it was that the seller seemed in such a hurry to close the sale. The papers flew by in a flurry of signings and handshaking, and before he knew it, the keys were his. On his first night surrounded by towers of moving boxes, Simon collapsed into bed, his mind drifting to thoughts of his newly shortened commute. He'd just set his alarm for 8 when some alien sound cut through the darkness, a peculiar scraping like metal grinding against stone. He held his breath, listening. There it was again. Heart quickening, he crept to the window and peered into the garden below. The night was still, quiet. Whatever had uttered the sound was gone. Believing it to be settling sounds of his new home, he went back to sleep, ignorant of what was stirring beneath the foundation. Morning brought another problem to surface. Trying to reverse his black Vauxhall Zafira out the driveway, Simon found that instead it jolted forward. Angry, he pressed harder on the gas. In a sudden lurch of the vehicle, it acted with an unsettling crunch. Out he stepped to investigate what happened, and the view made his blood run cold. The fractured driveway pavers gave way as he watched with aghast horror. In the concrete caved. Backwards he fell as the earth gave way with a dreadful crack, pieces tumbling to some bottom below. What stopped him in his tracks, however, was what he saw down below as the dust settled. Simon knew that this house had been built in the 1970s, and what lay below surely did not show up on any blueprint. Convinced that the surrounding pavers would hold his weight, he lay down flat on his stomach and slowly inched his way forward. Something metallic shone through the dirt. A shove here, a dig of a trowel there, and lo, the yielding earth brought into view a rusty, begrimed iron structure. Yanking and tugging without let, he could barely start what was fastened tight there. Further removal of dirt revealed a body hitched to something much greater than was at first apparent. The initial fear of a sinkhole swallowing his new home gave way to a more unsettling reality as the man-made nature of the cavity became clear. Simon knew he needed help. Minutes later, his father, Gerald, arrived, and together they carefully removed the fractured concrete, revealing a rectangular opening. There, descending into the shadows, stood a corroded ladder, its rungs disappearing into the unknown depths below. A shiver ran through them as they stood there staring down at the hidden passage. Simon had researched the property before buying. The ordnance surveys showed nothing but open land before the house was constructed, yet here was hard evidence to the contrary. They worked methodically, hauling bucket after bucket of dense earth away from the opening. As the pile of excavated dirt grew beside them, they removed almost 5 feet of dirt, a depth satisfactory to reach whatever was there. Simon descended halfway down the ladder where the doubts reached out and took hold. Caution overcame curiosity, and he scrambled back up for his selfie stick. He attached his phone to it and tentatively lowered the makeshift probe into the darkness. 2 distinct chambers were visible on the screen. Recognition widened Gerald's eyes, but they still needed verification. While Simon had purchased the property for £500,000, the land's history clearly held secrets. The elderly seller, the original owner, had failed to mention what lay beneath. The earth had finally given in to the void below on that first night of mysterious sounds. Father and son stepped away from the diggings for further investigation. A check in the plot number didn't take long to ascertain a more critical fact concerning its strategic location within the town's environs, and, of greater importance, construction date. My dad saw it and instantly said, "It's an air raid shelter," Simon explained later. "We found there are quite a few in this area." Research exposed it was a World War II-era shelter. The previous owner would have had to have known it was there, then decided to fill it in when landscaping the house and garden. As Simon told reporters, the structure's history dated back to 1938, when Sir John Anderson was tasked with preparing the county for war. Knowing bombardment was imminent, Anderson devised a plan to protect civilians, basic underground shelters that could be easily installed in residential gardens. These were shelters made of flexible, lightweight metal rather than concrete and could be quickly deployed at a moment's notice. More than 2 million such shelters were distributed throughout Britain, but as Simon and Gerald would soon discover, what lay beneath the driveway was something altogether different. The shelter under Simon's driveway was from 1938, built in the brief period following a bomb falling near Luton. The event had mobilized the community into building a communal shelter far more solidly than Anderson's domestic designs. This wasn't just some simple Anderson shelter with walls made of brick and concrete and several rooms to boot. As they proceeded further in, the startling finds popped up. A pale yellow edition of the Herald newspaper headlining, "Luton Airport, is this the end?" As the wartime daily events came into sharp focus. Foodstuff and evidence of water retention spoke to the long periods citizens would have had to invest huddled away from a blitz. "It's incredible to think it has all been made by hand," Simon told reporters, looking around at the carefully reinforced concrete walls with their protective brick and mortar buffer. Yet their work was far from complete. "We're about 5 feet down at the moment, so it's just another 5 feet to go," Simon explained. "One of the walls has been bricked up. I'm 90% sure we won't find out any more rooms, but we don't know. They might have bricked up one of the walls when the house was built to make way for the foundations." As word of the find got out, throngs of people congregated in Simon's driveway. Reporters, neighbors, history buffs, each trying to catch a glimpse of this well-preserved fragment of wartime Britain. Simon's focus remained on preservation rather than publicity. He felt a deep responsibility to protect this fragment of his country's heritage, to ensure it would not be lost to time and development. Now, Simon and Gerald want to restore the shelter in the hope it will be declared a historical monument. To them, it is more than just a curiosity of architecture, an actual link to one pivotal moment in history that needs to be preserved so others can experience and understand.